So, if you've just joined us, welcome to the third and final hour of the Power Zone, the Wednesday edition of the show. You find us live at 6 minutes after 2 o'clock, going into this one with Toto Geza, who's joining us this morning as an employment specialist and the executive director of SABI. They are the South African Anti-Bullying Institute. And this morning, we're putting that under the spotlight, bullying, right? But with a twist. We're talking about corporate bullying here. Toto is coming through to help us make sense of corporate bullying, or what many may refer to as bullying in the workplace. So we're putting that under the spotlight this morning. It's a thing, all right? It's pronounced to be here, and it may even constitute to an occupational health and safety hazard. So this morning we're looking at its patterns. We're looking at how rife it is, but also how to spot it, how to go about in reporting it as well, the complexities that come with this corporate bullying, because it's not just a clear bullying, it's in the workplace. So this morning we'll try get a sense of how does one then navigate this one. You find us live on 0861 987 000. There by X we go by at Power FM 987, at Katlego Legodi _ Toto. Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Katlego. Thank you for the time and the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, I really appreciate you starting your day with us and this particular man. I mean, sometimes you see some of these things playing themselves out, and it's like they are far until you get to be the one that is involved in this one. Sometimes we hear people saying it's an exciting time when one graduates and you want to go into the corporate world, but your spirit can be broken by some of the people that would do you hard, your hard done, day in, day out, going into these walls of work, and it can even make you reconsider your career as well. We're hearing that there are people that have been pushed to that point of reconsidering and saying that I don't think radio is for me. I'm gonna join Toto there and be an employment specialist and join Sabi and do something there with them because of something that you may have experienced in the workplace. Let's talk about corporate bullying. What is it? Let's break it down.
Corporate bullying, I think on your intro, you also refer to it as bullying in the workplace. Those words are used interchangeably. And when we look at the definition of it, it's defined, in fact, in the Code of Good Practice as an unwanted conduct or behavior by an employee or any other person in the workplace that would either intimidate or verbally, psychologically, or even to certain extents, even to the point of where you are excluded through actions or mobbing, everything that seeks to make you intimidated, uncomfortable, and feel like you are being targeted. So that, according to the Code of Good Practice of 2022, is defined as bullying in the workplace. And it should be, I must emphasize the point that unlike harassment, where harassment can happen in one occasion or a single occasion, but with bullying, it has to be repetitive or has been repeated exchange or experience for it to qualify as bullying. That's what the definition is. Yes.
You answered one of my questions, because I was going to ask you to say, let's break down this thin line between harassment and bullying, because we tend to see all of these being some of the issues that would land up on the HR desk as somewhat of a misconduct here, but you've touched on it. Really, when you look at bullying, it's something that you would then see it repeat itself. It's a pattern of some sort that would then see you in any way feeling like you're targeted here, looking at what would be taking place. But you mentioned that it come in different facets. Let's talk about the verbal one. Does it have to be clear, or do we see it maybe subtly? It hits you in a way that maybe when you're alone, you're like, Toto there, I don't think he meant that. Is it something that these perpetrators would make clear, or they have mastered the way of kind of in any way gaslighting you while bullying you there in the workplace. Let's talk about this one, especially the verbal one. Does it become clear maybe when someone screams at you and the likes? Let's break it down.
Sure. Look, sometimes it's easy to identify in some instances where someone uses a foul language or threatens or anything of that sort. But in most instances, it's difficult to pinpoint or to identify because it can be very subtle. In fact, we had a bullying and harassment summit, just to take you back a bit, last week in Johannesburg, where some of the discussions went into so far as indicating that that's why it makes for, or it results, in fact, for those who are victims to either opt to eat or just keep quiet, because it can be very difficult to pinpoint or to report or to clearly identify, because in terms of the code itself, it just refers to it as verbal bullying and then cite a few which can be identifiable. But in some instances, as you said, people can just gaslight you or use subtle innuendos. But when you are sitting alone and reflecting, you might see the pattern. These things are directed at you. They've got an intended objective. And therefore, as an individual, you would feel like you are being targeted or being bullied. But when it comes to proving, sometimes it can be difficult. And then that's what makes this behavior so difficult to take it into the formal space where there would be a formal hearing, because sometimes there won't be that much of evidence to confirm that which, as an individual, I might be or might have experienced or might be seeing playing out in front of me in the workplace, as it were.
What may be behind it then, Dodo? Is it a matter of maybe this person being intimidated by me, by my presence, or this person not wanting me in the space? You hear people talking about energies as well. We're not there for energies. We're here to work. So how do we then see this basically finding meaning in the workplace in this particular manner? And how then pronounced does it become in some of these spaces?
It's difficult to say for sure as to what could be or what often are trigger points for people to behave in that fashion. But of course, some research has shown that there's different push and pull factors. Some people are narcissists by nature. They enjoy seeing other people suffer. Sometimes it's a question of power relations, where those who are entrusted with power in the workplace can want to exert their power or influence through sometimes unscrupulous means. And when people respond, they also respond further and further exert their influence. So there are so many, there could be so many factors or contributing factors to such a behavior. However, what also comes out of that conversation is that there can be, in fact, the law, the legal framework provides for a framework where those who are at the receiving end of it can enforce or sort of force employers to make provisions or to respond positively to their calls, because the Code of Good Practice, for instance, enjoins employers to create a platform where there could be clear policies that define this, how the reporting mechanisms are to play out, the sanctions, or how the employer is committed to dealing with those matters. I think when that happens, if I'm a target, at least I'm comfortable to be able to go and report and try and safeguard my interests, at least confident that the employer would follow that which is a clear and defined policy in the workplace.
But if my employer is the one that is the bully in this instance, how do we then approach this one? Because there are those dynamics whereby the instances where the power dynamics will be at play here. This person is doing this because they know very well that I'm more or less at their mercy. So there's no room for me to maneuver. Even if I say I can take this matter to HR, I'm basically still facing the very same person that hired me, that hired HR as well as the founder of the company or even the CEO that can show us both the door. If he's not getting his or her own way, how difficult and complex does it then play itself out where the power dynamics or when the power dynamics are at play? Does it become a little bit easier when it's a colleague to colleague and we are on the same kind of bracket of some sort compared to this being a boss to an employee?
Yeah, very good question. I think it's a complex matter nonetheless, whether it's between an employee and a colleague. As we indicated earlier, sometimes it can be subtle and therefore unable to confirm or prove that which you are experiencing. It's even worse when it's your boss, because now this is the individual or a person who is supposed to be your protector, and now in this instance is actually the perpetrator of that which is unsavory. But again, the law makes provision for relief. For instance, if it was between myself as an employee and a colleague, then would obviously take the route of reporting to the employer, and the employer would have a positive duty to respond, investigate. Maybe if it's a minor bullying experience, then there could be mediation facilitated here. However, if it's of serious nature, then the code obligates the employer to constitute a formal hearing where at the end of it there could be a sanction. Now, if it's the employer and then you do not have any recourse, the Labor Relations Act provides an alternative relief where you can take your complaint and lodge a dispute at the CCMA. And then, because remember, if I take a step back a little bit, if it's your employer and you are unable to get any relief from the employer, it therefore means that your working conditions have been made intolerable. In other words, you are not free to perform your duties as you were expected. You are constantly under surveillance, or you are constantly under this abuse and victimization, which in terms of our law is defined as unfair discrimination. Now, that therefore, in terms of the Labor Relations Act, indicates that or places you in a bracket that says you are a victim of constructive dismissal. In other words, you can opt to resign and then lodge a complaint with the CCMA, and then you would indicate to them that your work conditions have been made intolerable in this instance, and you explain your circumstances, and therefore you wish to lodge a dispute. If you are successful, then you may be awarded compensation up to 12 months.
Sure. And the concerning part about this is that it does then have an impact on your mental well-being because you are under constant strain from this person. And because it's somewhat of a pattern of behavior, you don't pick it up. It does knock you down and take away from you day in and day out to a point whereby you're like, this is enough. Let's talk about the impact on the mental health of the employee. And do we see this also then coming through to affect their productivity as well because of these issues that are playing themselves out. Earlier on, I even pushed and stretched it here to say that it can then constitute also an occupational health and safety hazard in the workplace, looking at the fact that there is a person that is not, well, an employee that is not well here. Let's talk about its impact on you, especially where your mental health is concerned, because we do hear that it does impact on mental health and mental well-being.
Yeah, very true. That's a very important point because um, um, before I respond to your question, maybe our authority here, as you correctly say, the Occupational Health and Safety. The Occupational Health and Safety Act, Section 5, subsection 1, provides an obligation to employers to promote a safe and working environment. Generally, we often perceive or look at this OHSA as if it relates to physical safety. However, it has been proven through case law that this safe working environment extends to psychological safety as well. So in other words, employers have a duty to make sure that employees in the workplace are free of any form of abuse or unsafe or hazard, and including bullying and harassment. And to come back to your question, yes, when we defined or when we look at the definition of bullying, it relates to or it refers to verbal. There's also psychological, where people can be or employees can experience psychological abuse, emotional abuse, and that then results in mental health issues like anxiety on a Sunday evening when an employee has to go to work on Monday. She feels or he feels unwell because she's anxious because the boss or the bully would be waiting for her in the office. Some tend to end up going on extended sick leave because they can't take it. We've seen or consulted with clients, for that matter, who went on extended sick leave because of mental illness, because of depression, and end up on chronic medication because of the experiences they've had in the workplace. In fact, research that we have studied, especially in our preparation for the bullying and harassment summit, we got to see the extent at which, as South Africans, were exposed to bullying. 30% of the workforce in South Africa is said to have either experienced bullying or seen it play out in front of their face. And that then has resulted in psychological effects on those who have been the targets and also those who have experienced it. Also, that does not necessarily end up being an issue of mental health. It also have cost implications.
Yeah.
Employees tend not to be productive. Some would be absent from the workplace. So you'd find that the output of the company or the organization tends to be affected by this behavior of bullying. So it has a ripple effect, not only on the wellness of the employee, but also on the wellness of the institution itself, if the behavior is not managed properly, as envisaged by our legislators when they said right up from the Constitution, the right to dignity, right to freedom of self and person, and also right to equality. In other words, we are protected in terms of our Constitution from unfair discrimination. If all of us adhere to those constitutionally protected rights, it would mean that at least we would be free of bullying environments, including where we are in the workplace, for instance.
Yeah. I wanted to check in with you around the responsibilities of the employer or the companies themselves here. We do have human resources. They tend to really then be those people that would see these matters landing on their desks. And you mentioned the code of good practice as well. Do we see companies coming through with safe spaces? Do we see them, encouraging the culture of openness? Do we see them pushing as well programs that enhances company culture in a way that we find people not even attempting to try to bully you because there's no opportunity or chance to bully you, none whatsoever? Do we see this being somewhat of a priority for companies, that open platform as well for HR to be able to intervene here because there are clear guidelines that would constitute how people carry themselves in the workplace?
It's a very important point you're making, Katlego, because part of the conversation we've been part of or we've had and people, when we consult on these issues, we found that employers generally are still lagging behind in terms of even developing anti-bullying policies in the workplace. There seems to be confusion even from those who are in management in terms of their obligation, their positive duty to ensure that this scourge is eliminated in the workplace. I must also qualify that by saying, on the other hand, you do have employers or employer organizations who have really taken to heart the message from the Code of Good Practice of 2022. Some of them clearly in reference to what you are referring to, creating safe spaces, creating awareness in the workplace, conducting workshops for their leaders and staff in general. But I must be honest that there seems to be few and far in between. Most corporate experiences that we've had, sometimes not directly with companies themselves, but from the clients that we have consulted with across the spectrum, is that employers seem to be either reluctant to pursue this, or HR themselves are caught with their pens down. Excuse the pun, but the point I'm trying to make is sometimes those who are complainants, HR is supposed to be custodian of these processes. However, HR sometimes is found to be in collusion with those who are in power or who are at the decision-making table. So, which makes the process kind of muddied or complex in a way, because those who are expected to assist sometimes are compromised by the choices they make. But I think we continue to make the call that our legal framework places an obligation. And in fact, the Code of Good Practice further confirms or at least assures the employees that in the event that employers are not doing that which they are expected to do by the law, employees have a right of recourse. They can hold employers vicariously liable for actions done by those who are entrusted with power in the workplace.
Yeah, Toto, I have to let you go. But before we let you go, let's get your parting short. Maybe give us advices as well, as employees, as to how do we then go about it? How do we spot it and protect ourselves here? How do we even prevent it from, continuing? If maybe you pick it up here, do you read the room? Do you speak up as agile as you can? So this intervention, how do you then really go about it? Now we find a lot of people that are at the mercy of employers because there are no jobs. You don't have those options. So you really see a lot of people having so much to consider, but they do find themselves navigating this. Others may not even be aware that this person is isolating me, this person is bullying me, they are moving me around and they're trying to, frustrate me. Maybe as we close, do give us a sense of how do we then go about this one?
We also often encourage employees to speak up, not to be silent, because when you speak up, even those around you take notice. And we also encourage people not to be bystanders. In other words, not to sit and watch, but to be active participants, to assist, because if we, all of us make noise, our noise is much louder. And if all of us raises our hands can be visible. So the more the merrier. We encourage collectivism. We encourage all of us to be champions of anti-bullying in the workplace. And I think that's because collectively we can make a change, and we continue to make that call and encourage employees. If your employer has a policy, make sure that you follow the due process. However, if you have maybe managed to report, but there is no progress in dealing with your matter, as we indicated earlier, there are platforms like CCMA where you can go and lodge a dispute, and the agencies then will follow that up, and you would find that you might find resolution on those matters. But sometimes, as much as we can speak up, and because on the matter of there's no jobs and stuff like that, there comes a time where you need to choose yourself. You cannot continue to suffer because you might have the salary, but you might not be there to enjoy the salary. So sometimes you might need to choose your health, and even though it's not a nice choice that one would have to make, but others have made that choice so that they can protect their health and their well-being, where there seems to be no joy in terms of dealing with the sketch or what they are receiving on a daily basis. So, but ultimately, I think our call is that we speak up, and also we support. We do not become bystanders, but we are part of the action and support the anti-bullying campaign.
Awesome. Toto, I have to let you go. But before we do that, how do we follow your work, the work of Sabi as well? Who are you on social media?
Yes, we are on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Sabi is SABI, but we've also, if there are people who want to maybe chat with us on info@sabi, saabi.co.za. They can follow me, Dr. Geza, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and yes, they also can reach me at 068-420-6449. That's our business line, and then we also have a business WhatsApp, so they can drop us a chat, and then we will try and respond as swiftly as we can.
Awesome. Toto, thank you very much for starting the day with us and just sharing this wisdom. We are better people after this conversation, trust me. But do come back. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thanks, Katlego. Appreciated the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Awesome, man. Toto Geza coming through here as an employment specialist and an executive director of SABI. They are the South African Anti-Bullying Institute. I want us to go into a song. When we come back, we close the show off with Bernard Sitole. This will be our parenting corner.